Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Raj Echambadi, president of the Illinois Institute of Technology. Prior to his assuming the presidency at Illinois Tech, Raj served as the dean of D'Amore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, and before that, senior associate dean for strategic innovation at Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. It was there at Gies where he was a driving force behind the scaled online MBA program that was lauded as one of the best disruptive educational innovations in the past decade. Raj's vision for Illinois Tech is centered on four principles: honoring and strengthening the university's role as an engine of opportunity and national leader in economic mobility, pursuing growth through reimagining education to serve learners anywhere at all stages of life, fueling future innovation by empowering students to become the human-centered technologists, and exemplifying purpose-driven citizenship in the service of Bronzeville, Chicago, and the world. Raj joins us today to talk about how Illinois Tech is fast becoming an innovation center through these principles, all of which lead to inclusion and affordability. Raj, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drumm. Thank you for this opportunity. I've heard a lot of your podcasts, so really excited to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to have you here. You have such an interesting background, so atypical for most university presidents. Before we get into our topic today about reimagining universities for the future, give the listeners a little taste of who you are and where you've come from.
Grew up in India, mechanical engineer by profession. I was working for a tractor company, Massey Ferguson Tractors in India as a service engineer. And this is a true story, Drumm. One of my faculty instructors, when I was with their management development center, at the end of the training session, told me that I would make a good academic and I should go and pursue my higher education in the United States. Unfortunately, he passed away soon thereafter. So I never had an opportunity to ask him if it was a compliment. But here I am, 30 years later, came here to do my PhD at the University of Houston. I've had a long academic career since then, traversed Central Florida. I was at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and then went to Northeastern University, Boston. And here I am now at the Illinois Institute of Technology. I'm going to refer to Illinois Institute of Technology. It's a mouthful. I'm going to call it Illinois Tech from now on. But there are two very important things that I want to talk about, Drumm. One, my entire experience has shown me the power of higher education. Sometimes I have to pinch myself, Drumm, that I'm talking to people like you. But for higher education, I wouldn't be here. But the second is higher education that was affordable and accessible to me. I always say to people, I studied on the backs of the taxpayers of India and then had studied on the taxpayers of Texas, and here I am. So deeply committed to harnessing the potential of higher education, but more importantly, ensuring that there is accessibility and affordability so that people can benefit from higher education.
Well, you're a poster child for that. You have done that yourself, but beyond that, you have taken what you were given and given back to others in very meaningful ways, which is one of the things that I think is really important about higher education, the public good aspect.
Right. That is exactly right. I always say to people, but for higher education, you will have a lot of lost Marie Curies and Albert Einsteins and the Martin Luther Kings of the world, if you will. So higher educational institutions do a phenomenal job of ensuring that that talent doesn't get lost. To me, that is a very important part of who I am. And as importantly, I want our institution, Illinois Tech, to be the beacon of inclusive excellence, because that is extraordinarily important for a thriving democracy.
I think you're absolutely right with that. And IIT, Illinois Tech, is another great example of affordability and access.
Yes. And we were actually founded in 1890 on a very noble and resolute mission to educate students from all walks of life. The story goes as follows. We call it the $1 Million Sermon. Our first president, Frank Wakely Gonzalez, was a minister, went up in his congregation in 1890, and he was deeply distressed by the lack of educational options for the children of the Chicago's meat packers, steel workers, and machinists in the south side of Chicago. So he went up in the congregation and said, if only I had $1 million, I would educate these students so that they could become engineers and architects and physicists for the industrial society. Thank God, Drumm, there was somebody in the audience with $1 million, Philip Danforth Armour Sr. of the Armour Meatpacking Plant, who came to Minister Gonzalez and said, here is $1 million. Go ahead and fulfill that passion of yours. And the Armour Institute of Technology was born. For over 130 years, Drumm, we have actually fulfilled our promise. I'm going to give you a couple of proof points. We are number one in the state of Illinois in terms of moving people from the bottom 20th percentile to the top 20th percentile in terms of household income. And the other thing, and which is what we were honored recently by the Aspen Talent Institute and Bloomberg Philanthropies, they called Illinois Tech as an ATI High-Flyer institution. One of 28 institutions in the country to be named so, fundamentally for our work with ensuring college access, but as importantly, ensuring college success. Our employment rate is about 92% 6 months after graduation. And when you look at our student demographics, from 1/3 of our students are Pell students. 37% of our students come from the bottom 4 income categories, if you will. And when you compare that to our peer institutions, that number is about 19%. So that tells you our number is almost twice as much in the bottom 4 income categories, but our employment rate is very high, which is why we got this designation. Very honored to have gotten that designation, honoring the work of our illustrious faculty and staff. But that tells you our story very quickly, so in case people ask, why has this been possible for you, that you've been able to take people from the lowest socioeconomic categories and enable them opportunities? Fundamentally, it's because of our value offerings. We are a technology-based school, predominantly focused on engineering, computer science. We also have the first design school in the country, a preeminent architecture school, law school, business school, and the School of the Sciences. But you can see our education is very relevance-inspired, which enables students, once they are educated, to get gainful employment and become people that matter. So that's our founding story. And I found it inspirational, which is the reason why I joined Illinois Tech.
Well, it certainly is inspirational. And, thank you, Mr. Armour, for getting this started so many years ago. You're making a difference at Illinois Tech on moving people from, lower class to middle class. I don't like to put labels, but, low, helping them realize, quote, the American dream.
Correct.
This is really important, especially when you're dealing with folks who may not have the same kind of academic backgrounds. We need to touch on some of the scaffolding that you put in place for that. But when we talked before, we talked about 3 key points: inclusion, different pathways, and digital education. Let's talk about those with the framework that education really is about individual empowerment.
Correct. So I'll start off. I deeply, deeply believe in inclusive excellence. One of the inspiring things about Illinois Tech, since its founding in 1890, is we have always measured ourselves by how many people we include rather than how many people we exclude. And that has been a core value of ours. And whenever I go to events, people ask me, what is the greatest challenge facing civilization? And people have different answers, right? Climate change, people talk about fraying democratic value, lack of civic engagement, or you can name it, poverty, and so on. But to me, the fundamental foundational problem facing human civilization happens to be wasted human capital.
I would agree.
If we generate enough educational opportunities for all, then all these problems are going to get resolved. Fundamentally, when we think about inclusion, we think only in terms of individual empowerment, rightfully so. As I said, we have 92% employment rate of our students at graduation and so on. But higher education also does certain things in terms of fostering collaborativeness and teaching them values so that they can actually become good community citizens and societal members, which is extraordinarily important, if you will, for a thriving democracy. So what we have embarked on is what I call as human-centered technological education. When we spoke last, I was telling you about my education in India, world-class technological education, but had no idea. We did 8 math courses and 4 physics courses and 8 chemistry courses and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics, but not civics, not history, not geography, not, liberal arts education that makes you well-rounded. And I'm only speaking for myself right now. But when I came to the United States and I sat in these classrooms with these amazingly well-rounded students, that is when it struck me that technological education by itself is great, but unless otherwise you couple that with human-centered education so that people are not only individually empowered to fulfill their potential from a professional point of view, but they also need to be good citizens, which is what we are focused on with Elevate.
Yeah, which makes so much sense. I relate that back to my own education. I did my undergraduate degree at the Naval Academy. The Naval Academy, by legal statute, requires 80% of the graduates be technical majors, STEM, and 20% of liberal arts. But even in the technical majors, I was a physics major. Not that I was all that smart. I just learned how to do plug and chug really well. Find the formula that works and plug in the numbers, and there you go. Anyway, we were required to take a lot of liberal arts courses. I remember taking English courses, not only freshman year as part of the general education requirements, but as electives later on, taking law, things along those lines, plus the naval science, to get that well-rounded student, someone who, at the Naval Academy, you step into a leadership position as you graduate. In normal society, you don't do that because there's other things that you have to do. Be that as it may, if you want to give people the ability to step into leadership positions at some part of their career, they have to have a broad education because it's all about people. It's about being able to relate to people, to lead people, etc.
That is exactly right, Drumm. By the way, I want to thank you for your service. And part of our learnings was also talking to a variety of schools, including military academies and so on, because one of the things we were fascinated when we started developing this was, how do you develop leaders among young people, which is fairly critical. So our identity is what we call as elevate your future. So we tell these students, content is fantastic, but we want to develop engineers with EQ. And so what we try to do is mandate experiential learning opportunities for these students. So when we pair the rigorous classroom education they are getting with experiential learning, post-graduation outcomes are all but guaranteed. And that is how we are approaching this issue of pairing human-centered education with technology education to achieve a whole host of outcomes at various levels.
Mm-hmm. And that's so critical as part of the inclusion perspective. It's not only bringing in a lot of people, but it is the socialization of working with older people, younger people, different nationalities, races, socioeconomic backgrounds, all of those things.
That is exactly right. And one thing I always remind our young students is that you are going to learn from the faculty member, the sage on the stage, but they are also going to serve as guides on the sides because they are going to facilitate learning amongst you. You are going to learn from your peers. So keep your ears open, if you will, because your peers are going to teach you as much as the faculty member in the center of the classroom, if you will. And that's our goal.
Mm-hmm.
Learning comes from all shapes and all sizes. And how do you harness that learning into some things that matter to you?
Mm-hmm. And I'm putting my accreditation hat on at this point. It's important to have that cross learning, but also your faculty members are learning from students.
Correct. That is exactly correct. There is obviously a virtuous loop because at the end of the day, it's a learning culture that you need to develop. Once you have that learning culture, faculty teaching students, students learning from faculty, students learning from each other, and the faculty learning from students, that's a virtuous loop that leads to incredible outcomes.
Oh, you just touched on one of my favorite authors, Peter Senge. So the fifth discipline, I believe it was, that book? Yep.
Yes.
So of the 3 points inclusion, we've covered that very well. Different pathways to college degrees. There's a lot being out there right now. Not everyone looks the same. They don't go to the same type of schools, etc. I mean, one example is University of Cambridge, Lucy Cavendish College. It used to be that only 30% of their enrollment came from public schools. They've changed that. They're admitting 90%. 90%. And so with that, they've changed their enrollment processes, what they look for, etc. Bottom line, there's multiple paths to enrollment and a college degree.
Yes. To me, this is a very important point, Ram, because as higher educational institutions, especially four-year colleges, we are trained to recruit the 17 and 18-year-old students and direct that pipeline towards our colleges. And now there are various forces that are actually affecting higher education. You have the student debt and affordability crisis. The trust in higher education has fallen at an all-time low. 54% of parents and families do not trust that higher education is going to offer value in the long run. There is deep questioning of value. And because of all these kinds of things, what I think is fairly critical for universities to think about is to dismantle this pipeline model, but to think of students as coming with different pathways. Think of it as a braided river, if you will. Not to think of this student group as a monolith with a one-size-fits-all solution, but to start thinking about an individual student group and look at their needs and motivations and develop your value propositions as higher educational institutions to cater to these groups. And that is what I call as a pipeline to a platform model. So you dismantle the pipeline, you create a platform model, and then you provide opportunities for students to plug into your platform at points that are convenient to them. So instead of being abstract, I want to give you one example of what we did. We are a private school, but I always say we are a private school with a public school mission. So we do have 4-year undergraduate program. And there were some students, and we attempt to provide scholarships to everyone who wants to attend our school. But we found, even after all the scholarshiping and all the other opportunities that we provide, there were some students who were concerned about affordability. So we partnered with the local community college system. It's called the City Colleges of Chicago. The chancellor is a very innovative leader, Juan Salgado. So we worked out a scheme where we said to these admitted students, first year, spend time at city colleges if you want. Take courses there at community college prices, but you can live with us on our campus. You can get plugged into our student organizations. You can participate in all the Illinois Tech activities that help you belong. But go ahead and do the first year at a local community college. So you get the best of both worlds, if you will. And so these are the kinds of innovative opportunities that are out there for higher education leaders if they just take off the pipeline model and embrace a broader holistic platform model.
Mm-hmm. I would assume you have articulation agreements with the community college.
Yes.
Makes so much better sense because the community colleges are geared toward doing the general education requirements that you have to have first, second year, lower cost.
Yes.
And if you're providing the services for them at Illinois Tech, I mean, this is really innovative.
We do have articulation agreements. Articulation typically is at the end of 2 years. And then students come in the junior year. You hit upon an extraordinarily important point of socialization. So what we are trying to do here is these students would have gone to a 4-year institution. So we are melding the affordability that a community college can provide apart from the educational opportunity, but also bringing in an opportunity for them to belong early. So their educational career, if you will, is much more enriching. And so that's what this Ascend program is all about.
Yeah, and it makes so much good sense. Belonging, especially in young Black males, is such a critical factor, but really any, quote, different race. Do I belong here? Low socioeconomic status. Many of your students are first generation. They weren't, socialized in going to college. They never dreamed it was possible. And so getting that sense of belonging to where you're providing the tutoring so that people, if they don't have the skills, can get there. You're providing the social groups so that students feel that belonging. They can see others who've got similar stories. This is really, really innovative, Raj. This is fabulous.
Thank you. If I may add one more thing. There was somebody who once asked me a question. What is the difference between an explorer and somebody who's lost? And I said, I don't know. And the person answered, it is in the mindset. And that goes back to the profoundly important point you just made, Drumm. It is all about belonging. And there are ways by which universities can foster belonging. But our own story, Illinois Tech story, of having 1/3 Pell students with employment outcomes of 92%, that tells you it is all possible. So when people talk about academic backgrounds and perspectives and all that stuff, I say to people, all that can be taught. But apart from teaching the content, you also have to teach a mindset. The mindset is fundamentally they belong. And for that, the institution has to work very hard to make them belong. Mm-hmm. There are things that you need to do as a higher education institution so that people don't feel distant and people don't feel that this is not a part of who I am. Because at the end of the day, if you foster that culture of belonging, I think great things can happen.
Oh, absolutely. It's not only you believing in yourself, but it's others believing that you belong, they believe in you, because that belief in self frequently comes first from someone saying, I know you can do this.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. That is exactly.
So just to clarify, when you're talking about the platform model not being a pipeline, you're not necessarily talking about an enrollment pipeline. You're talking about something different.
Correct. To me, it is fundamentally about understanding the needs and motivations of our individual students and then ensuring that we provide the right programs and probably new pathways to accommodate a broader segment, if you will. So that's what we mean by this going from a pipeline to a platform model.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to get there with this before the end of the podcast. This sounds like something that would come out of Rep 4, Rapid Education Prototyping 4 with Philly Mantella.
Yes, we have been invited to join the Rep4 Alliance. Philly Mantala, President Mantala of Grand Valley State University, and we were colleagues at Northeastern University. And I've said this to you, Drumm, privately. She's probably the most innovative university president in the country. But the program Rep4, Rapid Educational Prototyping, she has constructed an alliance of like-minded institutions. But one of the most amazing things about Rep4, it is devising strategies by learners for learners. A lot of times, when we are in higher ed, and all of us mean well, but when we start devising strategies for learners from the top, if you will, from when the deans make these kinds of strategies, etc., a lot of times they don't work. And so the beauty of Philly's model is it is fundamentally organic. It is a bottom-up orientation where the learners decide and dictate what these strategies should be. And it is our job as higher educational leaders to make sure that those strategies get implemented and our learners are empowered. So that is Rep4, which is, it sounds so commonsensical, but as my mother used to say, common sense is not all that common, son. But and so that to me was a very powerful eye-opener to be learner-centric and put the student at the center of the equation. Kudos to Philly for that.
It's interesting. Yeah, kudos to Philly for sure. But it's interesting. Everyone says we're learner-centric, but do they really know what that means? And we're not going there today.
Yes.
So the third leg of this stool, besides inclusion and different pathways, is digital education. This is critical. It's critical. We're in a digital society.
Yes. As you rightly said, we live in a physical plus digital world. Let's say I want to buy a headset. I go to an online retailer and say, I want this headset. But then I go to that physical store and then I pick up that headset, if you will. So we are living in the seamless world that moves from the physical to the digital. So I personally believe a digital philosophy is going to be extraordinarily important for higher education in the short run, fundamentally for two reasons. I think the students who are coming in are going to demand this hybrid optionality. They want to say, hey, I want to do an internship in the spring, but I don't want to lose out on learning opportunities. So I can learn online, but be physically in an internship elsewhere. So hybrid optionality is going to become important for our residential students. But as importantly, I firmly believe that having online options is going to be extraordinarily important. I say this line often: restricting access for education to a select few that come to our campuses is by definition exclusionary. True inclusion implies educating students anywhere, any place, anytime. Think about a student who has a full-time job and who has to work to ensure the needs of his or her family, or rural students who don't have the ready-made options. So it is imperative for us as higher educational institutions to build digital access for our students and think about the residential students, think about hybrid offerings and online offerings. Mm-hmm. And my viewpoint has also been shaped by my experiences. When I was at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I led the team that helped develop and launch the first scaled online MBA program in partnership with Coursera. In about 6 or 7 years since its launch, that program now reaches about 5,000 students a year all over the world. And it happens to be the largest online program in the world. 10% of all online MBAs in the United States come from the university.
Wow.
So that tells you the reach of online offerings, if you will. And to me, if we want to build a truly inclusive society, I think having a digital arm is going to be important. If I make one more point, a lot of times when I talk to fellow university presidents, they talk about an e-campus and a physical campus. And I say to people, don't do that. It was e-commerce 20 years ago. It is commerce now. And so e-campus should be integrated into our physical campuses. So think of it as a digital layer that enables you to give multiple optionalities to your learners. So digital is extraordinarily important for the aspirations and ambitions of higher education.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to take just a moment to summarize what we've talked about, because this is really, really important stuff. There's the inclusion piece with this, different pathways. We all don't come through that 17 to 18-year-old pipeline, the digital education. You've talked about this as a partnership of the willing. And you're going out, you're creating these alliances with the community college district there in Chicago, et cetera, your Ascend program, et cetera. Really, you're the orchestra conductor.
Yes.
You've got a lot of really great players in your orchestra, but you're the one to bring them all together. Kudos to you for doing that. This is really an important thing that you're doing.
Thank you. And what you just said about orchestra conductor bears repeating, because a lot of times in higher ed, we want to control the end-to-end value chain. We want to control the recruiting pipeline. We want to control the experiences. We want to control the relationship with your partners who provide the career outcomes for our students, etc. And what we are fundamentally proposing at Illinois Tech is there is a different model which requires us to orchestrate resources. There are so many resources out there. And so the university president should be like an orchestra conductor. So there are various players, instrument players within the orchestra with incredible skills. But the university president must orchestrate and conduct, harmonize, synchronize, so that there is unified music that comes out. To me, it is about harnessing the power of individual talent so that we collectively maximize our potential. And that can only be possible if we become a part of the ecosystem. We may be the hub of that ecosystem. We have various spokes, if you will, but it is extraordinarily important that we reject the original end-to-end value chain model. And one of the concerns, whenever I say these kinds of things to people, that we need to become orchestra conductors rather than individual team players, people say, oh my God, we have to give revenue shares and we need to, share our profits and with other people. And I always say 10% of a grapefruit is still better than 100% of a grape. So what this ecosystem will do is fundamentally expand the pie for all of us. But more importantly, it will enable us to be truly mission focused. True inclusion cannot happen if we are in our corner of the world and basically say we want to control every aspect of the experience. That doesn't work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I knew this was going to happen, Raj. We are at the end of our time. So for the folks listening on, 3 takeaways for university presidents and boards.
First, be student-centric. We talked about Rep 4. Make sure that learners are the architects of their future. That is extraordinarily important. Students are not monolithic groups. They have individual aspirations, individual dreams, and individual motivations. So try to figure out what they are and try to capitalize on helping them accomplish their potential through various programs and various pathways, if you will. The second point I would say, which we just talked about, is universities should learn to become resource orchestrators in order to maximize individual potential as well as the collective potential of the institution. And the last but not the least, target non-consumption. I came from the business school, so I'm probably used to business school jargon. Fundamentally, it is about expanding access, offering new programs and offering new ways. And what I mean by this is whenever we get together as leaders of higher education, we are always worried about the impending enrollment cliff in 2025. And that's a scarcity mindset, in my opinion. We need a growth mindset because this problem, while it seems unique, and I want to give a couple of numbers, Ron. In 1860, we had a population of 30 million people, only 63,000 students in higher ed. So when you do the math, it's 0.002%. Today, 20 million people go to undergrad or graduate education in our 2-year and 4-year colleges out of a population of about 330 million, close to about 10% or so, 8% or so. So where I'm going with this is, think about all the changes that happened. We had the formation of women's colleges in the 1800s, the Morrill Act in 1860. We had HBCU formation after 1865. Come to the turn of the century, you had immigrants coming in. GI Bill 1945, Pell through 1965 Higher Education Act, digital education, end of the 20th century, early part of the 21st century. We have always been about expanding access, about offering new ways and offering new programs. And that's the way forward for us. And the way to think about the future is to bring in people who are not in the fold yet, expand access to them, and have that growth mindset. And that growth mindset is going to augur well for us in the future.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, I had a conversation just recently with Courtney Brown, who's one of the folks from the Lumina Foundation. And, they have an it's a formal goal mission that 60% of people will be college graduates.
Yes.
They are very, very close, and they had a deadline of 2025 or 2030. I can't remember exactly, but what you're talking about is helping them make that goal, having a more educated society, which can solve all these problems that we have.
Yes.
Listening to folks who know what they want, the students coming in, making it more inclusive.
Correct. And if I may briefly, there is a movement afoot, as you know, it's called Tear the Paper movement that says college education is not required and so on. And I think that's a very limiting philosophy, limiting perspective. We are trying to target a butterfly with a bazooka with that. Yes, there are affordability problems. You have tackling them with innovative solutions. We are going into this dichotomous, no college required, etc. I worry about this, Drumm. And I'm not saying this purely from a selfish perspective as a university president. I worry about it because when you think about the greatness of our country, especially in the last 150 years, it is fundamentally our gross enrollment ratio. People who go to 2-year or 4-year colleges is very high compared to the denominator, if you will, compared to even other Western countries, especially at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, where information is becoming more important and data and technology pervades our lives. It is absolutely critical that we have people with college level experiences and college level content, because that is going to be extraordinarily important for us as a country in terms of economic development. But also, dare I say, it's a national security issue in the long run, which is why I'm very passionate about inclusion, bringing more people in, increasing our gross enrollment ratio, because that will help us become the leader of the next generation as well as a country.
Well said, Raj. Well said. What's next for you? What's next for Illinois Tech?
We are excited about possibilities, Drumm. I have a 3-pronged approach. One, reimagine education so that we are not just in the business of degrees, but we are in the business of educational experiences. And I've already talked to you about being an orchestrator. So we want to become a networked university, assemble like-minded entities and form a network so that we can help our individual students and learners to help accomplish their potential. Second, we want to be a research-inspired, relevance-inspired research university. There are lots of great schools in the country that focus on basic research. We are about applied research. We are focused on 3 macro areas: advanced manufacturing, health, and medicine, and sustainability as our 3 focal areas, if you will. And last but not the least, I firmly believe this. We live in the south side of Chicago, the historic Bronxville neighborhood. I firmly believe a strong university must have a strong community surrounding it. And the university must do everything in their power to develop win-win relationships with our communities. So we are working on that. So obviously, one of the initiatives we have had is called Bronzeville Opportunity Engine. It was funded by a federal earmark. And so our job is to educate the residents of Bronzeville in entry-level technology jobs so that they can actually go ahead and get middle-class jobs and they can support their families better. So we are looking at it holistically, very excited about the possibilities and opportunities that are in front of us, and very thrilled to lead an organization that is so purpose-driven, that has a fabulous board and wonderful faculty and staff. So the future is extraordinarily bright.
Yeah. Well, Raj, thank you for being on the program. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. This is a testament to what you guys are doing. Keep up the great work, Raj, and thank you again for being a guest.
Thank you. Thank you, Drumm. Thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to our guest, Dr. Raj Echambadi, President of the Illinois Institute of Technology, and for his sharing with us how Illinois Tech continues to be an affordable center of innovation. Thanks, Raj. I look forward to having you back on the show to continue our discussion. Join us next week when we welcome Dr. Marie DeSanctis, President of the Community College of Denver. Marie has a unique background, having been in both K-12 and now community colleges, and she'll be joining us to talk about the various pathways high school students take to get to college and the strategies that university and college presidents must put in place to ensure they enroll, stay enrolled, and graduate. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.